This week we are looking at chapters 5 and 6. So we're going to look at a major war that happened before the American Revolution and how that war kind of is one of the root causes of the American Revolution. I do want to just quickly point out, kind of like as this introduction to chapters 5 and 6 does, for a long time, a lot of people were battling over the territories in North America, right? So you have native peoples who were competing for space way before the Europeans got here. Then once the Europeans got here, that conflict and that struggle for land has been happening since the 1400s. And you could argue that it's still going on even today. And a lot of the history that you end up reading about, it's always the winners who get to write the history. And for a long time, all people in America learned about were white colonizers and white colonies, white settlement, because those were the winners. And we even tried for a minute to erase Spanish colonization and Spanish territories. And we, of course, have tried to eliminate the native voice from this as well. So I do want to point out that your book does try to give you viewpoints of all peoples involved, whether that's Native, African American, white, being like from Spain, England, France, the Dutch. They do try to give a viewpoint, even women, and later on in the book, even more marginalized groups throughout history. So you'll notice that your book does try to give you that native voice when it can, but there are reasons why we don't have a lot of native stories being told, and that's kind of a cultural thing. Those of you who are native, you'll understand this. A lot of native history, it's not written history, it's oral history. And so that's why we don't have a lot of written documentation of what was happening with the native population at the time. You will read about this gentleman here. This is Pontiac. He's an Ottawa war chief. So you'll read about him in Pontiac's Rebellion when you get into chapter 5. Chapter 5 does discuss this major war known as the 7 Years' War, although you'll notice it actually lasts for 9 years. And it's also sometimes referred to as the French and Indian War. Not to be confused with the series of French and Indian wars that you've been learning about up to this point, like the Tuscarora, the Yamasee Wars, King Philip's War, King Anne's, King William's War. Those are all a series of French and Indian wars, but the war that we're talking about in chapter 5 is the French and Indian War. So this is against the French and their Indian allies. And what ends up happening in this war is the royal treasury is completely drained, because you'll notice this is like a truly global conflict. This is a global war that takes place on 3 separate continents. It happens here in the Americas, in North America, it happens in Europe, and also parts of Asia in the subcontinent of India. That's why I included this picture here for you. So in order to recoup some of that money, what you're going to learn about at the end of chapter 5 is we start to tax people. And this tax burden is not only for people living in England, but it's also now become a tax burden for the colonists. In the colonies, we had been taxed before, but now we're seeing more direct taxes that are going to impact us on a daily basis, like never before. And so we have a lot of protests that happen. We have a lot of laws that are being passed in order to stop some of this protesting. And you're going to read about the laws, such as the Declaratory Act. So it's one of those acts that they come and they repeal the Stamp Act, but then they pass this Declaratory Act, and basically that act just means we can declare any law whenever we want, without your approval, without warning, and you have to abide by it. Really showing like who is in charge and really enforcing their power. And you have a series of coercive acts that are passed, and that is in response to the Boston Tea Party. So you have all these laws and these acts. If you see an act, ACT, just think of that as a law being passed after the French and Indian War. And some of that is in reaction to the French and Indian War and trying to just recoup the money from the French and Indian War. And then as we move from chapter 5 and chapter 6, you'll start hearing about the protesting and the riots that were happening. And you'll see things being brought up about the Sons of Liberty and these groups that are forming like these committees of correspondence. And, women are the backbone of a lot of these protests. and how it goes from protesting to just all-out acts of defiance, like at Lexington and Concord. And pay attention to what side the natives choose, because they may switch sides. They were on one side during the French and Indian War, but now that we have the American Revolution, they may choose a different side. And really, they're like looking for who's going to give us the best opportunity, right? Also, African Americans, blacks during this time, they were offered freedom. You're going to learn about Lord Dunmore's proclamation. And basically it says, hey, if you're enslaved, come to me and fight for me, and I'll end up setting you free at the end of the war. So you have a lot of blacks who end up fighting for the British with that promise of freedom at the end of the war. So I put up the learning objectives for you from chapter 5, some videos, crash course, some videos to help you reinforce what you're learning. I'm also going to start adding in some Black history crash course videos, which tell you the African American side of what's happening during this time period as well. So I'll try to put one of those in every week just to give you a different perspective. And then the assignments will be here for you for chapter 5. Here is the PowerPoint if you want to use that. And then here's chapter 6, learning objectives, some more videos for you there. And then of course the PowerPoint is there. You will notice I don't have the assignments posted in this video, but when you are actually looking over this video and you're in the module, you will be able to see that the assignments are posted and ready for you to start early if you would like to.